Breaking news tonight, something as ordinary as corn, yes, the same crop you see stacked in supermarkets and served on dinner tables, has suddenly become the unlikely weapon in a growing global standoff. What might sound like a small story about agriculture is quickly turning into a high-stakes battlefield where politics, economics, and survival collide. And right at the center of it all is the simple yellow grain that nobody thought could carry so much weight on the world stage. For decades, corn was seen as a farmer's crop, a backbone of rural America, a steady and predictable commodity. But in recent months, as trade disputes have heated up, corn has transformed into something far larger. It is no longer just about feeding cattle or fueling ethanol. It is about power. The United States, a country that has long prided itself on being the world's agricultural giant, suddenly finds itself in a tug of war where every shipment, every trade deal, every bushel sold across borders carries political meaning. And Canada, the quiet neighbor often overshadowed by its southern counterpart, has stepped into the picture in ways that no one quite expected. Imagine being a farmer in Iowa where fields stretch endlessly and corn is not just a crop but a livelihood, a tradition passed down through generations. These farmers now wake up each day checking not just the weather forecast but also international headlines because a policy decision in Ottawa or Washington could make or break their entire season. That's how far-reaching this battle has become. Families who once only worried about rainfall and pests now find themselves caught in the middle of a geopolitical chess game. And it isn't just American families. Canadian farmers, too, are navigating a delicate balance, realizing their trade choices could tip the scales in a much bigger confrontation. Behind the scenes, government off. Officials and trade negotiators know what's at stake. Corn may seem small compared to oil or steel, but in global economics it is massive. It feeds livestock that in turn feeds nations. It fuels cars through ethanol, driving entire industries. It supports billions in exports, shaping the strength of national economies. And when one country uses tariffs, restrictions, or alliances to control its flow, the ripple effect is instant and often devastating. Prices spike, supply chains strain, and ordinary people, consumers at the grocery store, feel the pinch. The irony is that corn, a crop that symbolizes abundance and prosperity, is now being wielded as a tool of leverage, a bargaining chip in a contest of dominance. And this is why analysts are calling it the unexpected battlefield. No one imagined that a plant so rooted in everyday life would rise to this level of significance in global politics. But here we are, where one wrong move, one retaliatory tariff, one new alliance could shift the balance of power not only between the United States and Canada, but also with other players watching closely from across the globe. So what happens next? Will corn remain a quiet pawn in this international game, or will it prove to be the deciding factor in who holds the upper hand? Experts say this fight is far from over and the world is watching closely. For farmers in the fields, for policymakers in the halls of government, and for consumers buying groceries each week, the story of corn is no longer just about food. It has become a story about influence, strategy, and survival in a rapidly changing global order. And that is why corn, yes, corn, has suddenly become the unexpected weapon in global politics. Stay with us. This story is only beginning to unfold. Breaking news. Canada, the country often known for its calm diplomacy and quiet presence on the world stage, has just stepped into a fight that could reshape the future of agriculture and trade across North America. For years, Canada was seen as the polite neighbor, the steady hand next to the United States, rarely making moves that shook the balance of power. But in the shadow of a growing corn trade war, That image is changing, and what once looked like a silent observer is now becoming a potential game changer. The story begins in the cornfields of America, where farmers have long dominated the global market. Corn has been one of the United States' strongest exports, feeding animals, fueling industries, and filling grocery stores worldwide. But as tariffs, trade disputes, and political tensions mount, America's grip on this market is loosening. And just as cracks begin to show, Canada has quietly slipped into a position that few expected, offering itself as both a competitor and a partner, depending on how the winds of policy blow. Imagine a farmer in Nebraska watching the headlines, worried about what will happen to the price of his crop. For generations, his family has relied on stable trade with international partners, and now he's hearing that Canadian producers are stepping in to fill gaps left by U.S. disputes. That's not just an economic challenge, it's a personal one. Every decision made in Ottawa or Washington directly impacts whether his farm thrives or struggles. Meanwhile, on the Canadian side, farmers who once played a smaller role in the global corn market suddenly find themselves holding cards that carry surprising influence. For them, this is a rare chance to rise in an industry long overshadowed by the United States. Behind the scenes, Canadian leaders are navigating carefully. They know that stepping too boldly could strain relations with their largest trading partner, but staying too quiet means missing a historic opportunity. And so Canada is moving with precision, building trade ties, strengthening alliances, and positioning its agricultural sector as a reliable alternative in a time of uncertainty. What makes this moment so striking is that Canada isn't doing it with loud announcements or dramatic gestures. It's doing it quietly, strategically, almost invisibly, but with results that are beginning to turn heads. The ripple effects are already being felt. Global buyers who once relied almost entirely on American corn are now testing the waters with Canadian suppliers. This doesn't just shift profits, it shifts influence. When a nation can control the flow of something as essential as food, it gains leverage in conversations far beyond agriculture. Energy deals, trade negotiations, even political alliances can be swayed by the trust built in something as simple as the consistency of a corn shipment. And that is where Canada's role transforms from quiet neighbor to potential game changer. For the United States, it's a wake-up call that dominance is never guaranteed. For Canada, it's a rare moment in history to step out of the background and into the spotlight. And for the rest of the world, it's a reminder that power can come from unexpected places, not only from armies or oil reserves, but from the soil, the harvest, and the ability to deliver when others cannot. As this story unfolds, one question remains. Will Canada's cautious rise reshape the balance of agricultural power in North America, or will the United States find a way to pull the reins back? For now, the world is watching, farmers are waiting, and the markets are reacting. And in the middle of it all, Canada, the quiet neighbor, is proving that sometimes the softest voice can carry the most power. This is a story still in motion, and it's ending back in. I surprise us all. Stay tuned. Breaking news tonight. The headlines talk about tariffs, trade wars, and shifting alliances, but behind those numbers and political statements, there's a very different story unfolding. It's a story about people, about families, and about farmers standing in the middle of fields they've worked for generations, wondering if this season might be the one that breaks them. While politicians argue in conference rooms and negotiators shuffle papers, the human cost of this corn trade war is being felt far from the cameras in small towns where agriculture is not just an industry, but a way of life. For an American farmer in Iowa or Nebraska, the field is more than just land. It's the family legacy, the pride of feeding a nation, and the hope of passing something secure down to children. But in the past year, those same farmers have watched prices swing wildly, sometimes dropping so low they can't cover the cost of fuel, seed, and labor. Every decision made in Washington or Ottawa ripples outward like shock waves, and it lands hardest on the shoulders of people who have the least control over it. And the pressure doesn't just stay in the fields, it follows them home. Kitchen tables become war rooms where families calculate how many more weeks they can hold on, how many bills they can delay, and whether the bank will extend another loan. Take the story of a Midwestern farmer who recently told reporters he can't sleep at night anymore. His farm has survived droughts, floods, and storms, but he's not sure it can survive the volatility of global politics. He wakes up at dawn, not only to tend to his crops, but also to check international news, trying to understand decisions made thousands of miles away that could decide whether his corn will sell for profit or loss. He said, "It's not the weather I'm scared of anymore, it's the headlines." That simple statement captures the fear of thousands like him. On the Canadian side of the border, the picture is different, but no less tense. Farmers who once worked quietly without much global attention now find themselves in the spotlight, suddenly playing a larger role in filling market gaps. At first, it feels like an opportunity, but it also comes with uncertainty. What if the market shifts again? What if alliances change? What if being a substitute supplier today turns into being the target of pressure tomorrow? These farmers may be on more stable ground in the short term, but they too are standing on shifting soil, watching carefully to see how long this fragile balance will last. The human cost goes beyond finances. It's about mental health, about stress levels rising in rural communities already struggling with fewer resources and less visibility. It's about young people leaving the family farm, unsure if agriculture has a future worth staying for. And it's about the ripple effect across small businesses, equipment dealers, local stores, trucking companies that depend on farms to survive. When farmers struggle, entire towns feel the impact. All of this shows that a trade war fought on paper is lived out in real lives. Corn isn't just a number on a chart. It's food on the table, it's fuel in the tank, and it's the thread holding communities together. And when that thread begins to fray, it's not just farmers who pay the price, it's everyone who depends on the stability they provide. So while leaders continue to debate strategies and policies, it's worth remembering who carries the true burden. Farmers don't make the headlines, but they live the consequences. And as this story continues to unfold, one truth is clear. The cost of this battle is measured not just in dollars, but in human lives, in the resilience of families, and in the survival of communities. That's the reality behind the headlines. Saint. Hey, with us. Breaking news tonight. Corn, a crop most of us think of as food on the dinner table or feed for livestock, has suddenly been revealed as something much more powerful. Behind the headlines of tariffs, trade disputes, and global negotiations, corn has quietly become a tool of strategy, a weapon of influence, and a symbol of national strength. This isn't just about farming anymore. This is about power. Who controls it, who loses it, and how something as ordinary as corn can reshape the future of politics and economics across the globe. For generations, corn has been a cornerstone of American agriculture. It fuels industries, fills supermarket shelves, and drives billions of dollars in exports every year. But beneath the surface, corn has also been tied to energy security through ethanol, to global food supply through livestock feed, and to economic leverage through trade deals. And that's where the hidden strategy lies. When one nation controls the flow of corn, it doesn't just control food, it influences transportation, energy, and entire economies. That makes this simple crop far more valuable than it appears on the surface. Consider what happens when trade relations shift. A single tariff, a disrupted shipment, or a renegotiated deal can send ripple effects across the globe. Suddenly, prices rise in grocery stores, farmers face uncertainty in their fields, and industries that depend on corn-based products, from fuel to packaging, find themselves scrambling. It's in these moments that leaders recognize corn is not just an agricultural product, it's leverage, a bargaining chip in negotiations that extend far beyond the farm. And it's not only the United States and Canada caught in this struggle. Countries around the world, from China to Brazil, are watching closely, knowing that whoever secures the most reliable access to corn also secures a stronger foothold in global trade. On the ground, farmers might not talk in terms of strategy, but they feel the consequences every day. An American farmer in Illinois or Iowa sees his crop as a way to provide for his family, but also knows his harvest will be tied to decisions he can't control. A Canadian farmer once considered secondary in the corn market now finds himself in a position of influence as global buyers look beyond the U.S. for alternatives. Their fields have become part of a silent power struggle, a chessboard where every bushel harvested carries more than just economic value. It carries political weight. The irony is striking. Corn, a symbol of abundance and stability, is now at the center of competition and uncertainty. It has become a way for nations to send messages without words, to apply pressure without force, to shape outcomes without firing a shot. It is, in many ways, a hidden weapon, quiet, unassuming, but capable of shifting balances of power in ways we are only beginning to understand. The question now is, who will use this strategy most effectively? Will the United States maintain its dominance, or will emerging players find ways to capitalize on the moment? Will Canada step fully into its role as a trusted supplier, or will global competitors rewrite the rules altogether? What is certain is that corn's role has already changed, and the world is paying attention. As this story continues, one truth is undeniable. Corn isn't just about food anymore. It's about influence, resilience, and the ability to shape the future. And in a time when power is being contested on every front, this humble crop has proven itself to be one of the most unexpected but most critical weapons of all. Stay with us. Breaking news tonight, numbers are coming in that no one expected, and they are painting a picture that could change the way we see global trade. For months, the conversation has been about tariffs, disputes, and shifting alliances, but now the data tells its own story. Behind the charts and spreadsheets are changes so dramatic, they are leaving farmers, policymakers, and entire industries stunned. These are not just small adjustments or seasonal fluctuations. These are shocking shifts that threaten to rewrite the balance of power in agriculture, and corn is right at the center of it all. At first, it seemed like business as usual. The United States has long been the dominant force in corn exports, feeding not only its own population but supplying markets across the globe. But as trade tensions escalated and negotiations stalled, subtle cracks began to form. Then came the numbers, shipments dropping by double digits, export markets shrinking, and buyers turning elsewhere at a speed few thought possible. Canada, once a minor player in this arena, is suddenly seeing its exports rise, filling gaps left behind by U.S. uncertainty. And these aren't just marginal increases. In some cases, Canadian corn exports are spiking in ways that analysts admit they didn't predict even 6 months ago. For an American farmer standing in the middle of his field, this shift doesn't show up as a statistic. It shows up as fewer calls from buyers, lower prices offered at the grain elevator, and mounting pressure from the bank that financed this year's seed and fertilizer. What looks like a chart on a government website is, for him, the difference between making it through another season or facing the unthinkable possibility of shutting down. And across the border, Canadian farmers are watching their own numbers climb, cautiously optimistic, but also aware that any sudden change in policy could just as quickly pull the ground out from under them. The ripple effects stretch far beyond North America. Countries in Asia and Europe that once relied almost exclusively on American corn are diversifying their suppliers, building new trade relationships, and signaling that their loyalty may not return even if U.S. exports recover. For global markets, these numbers suggest a permanent shift rather than a temporary detour, and that's what makes them so shocking. Trade flows that took decades to establish are unraveling in a matter of months, replaced by new pathways that could define the future for years to come. Economists are warning that these shifts don't just affect agriculture. When a major commodity like corn changes direction, it sends shockwaves through food production, energy markets, and even transportation. Ethanol producers feel the squeeze when prices collapse. Cattle ranchers face higher costs when feed supplies tighten. Trucking companies and shipping lines adjust routes as demand moves across borders. The numbers reveal a domino effect, each piece falling into the next, reshaping industries far removed from the cornfields themselves. And yet, amid all this, the most unsettling part is the speed. Experts admit they did not see it coming. They expected gradual adjustments, not sudden upheavals. But in this new era of fragile trade relations, one policy decision, one tariff, or one shift in demand can upend decades of stability almost overnight. It is a reminder of how interconnected and vulnerable the system truly is. As the data continues to roll in, one thing is clear. The old assumptions about who leads and who follows in the corn trade no longer hold. The numbers are shocking not just for their size, but for what they signal about the future. For farmers, for governments, and for everyday consumers, this is more than a story of markets. It is a story of resilience, adaptation, and survival in a rapidly changing world. And the question now is whether anyone can regain control before the numbers tell a story that cannot be reversed. America, once the undisputed powerhouse of global agriculture, now finds itself facing a question that cuts deeper than policy debates or market reports. Will the United States fight back to reclaim its dominance in the corn trade, or will it stand by as rivals quietly outmaneuver it? For decades, America's vast cornfields symbolized more than just abundance. They represented stability, influence, and strength on the world stage. But as new players step forward, alliances shift, and markets adapt to uncertainty, that dominance is no longer guaranteed. And now the nation is staring down a future where it must decide whether to double down on its role or risk being outplayed in its own game. The story begins with the farmers, the men and women who rise at dawn to work the soil, who believe that no matter the politics in Washington, the world would always need what they grew. For generations, that belief held true. American corn fed livestock from Asia to Europe, supplied industries from biofuels to food processing, and delivered billions in export revenue. But then came tariffs, trade wars, and shifting global priorities. Suddenly, those guarantees began to unravel. Buyers who once relied exclusively on U.S. shipments started looking elsewhere, turning to countries like Canada and Brazil, countries that saw an opening and took it. And with every shipment diverted, America's grip weakened. The effects are not just economic, they are personal. In the Midwest, families who have farmed for generations are watching profits vanish. They hear about global competition on the news, but for them it means delayed loan payments, smaller harvest crews, and nights spent wondering whether they'll have to sell off land their grandparents once plowed. These farmers represent the human side of a much bigger question. If America cannot protect its farmers, can it protect its place as a global leader in agriculture at all? Meanwhile, outside U.S. borders, other nations are seizing the moment. Canada has been positioning itself as a reliable partner, building trade routes and securing deals with buyers the U.S. used to dominate. Brazil, too, is ramping up production, fueled by growing demand and political will to take a bigger slice of the global market. For these nations, this is not just about corn. It's about proving that the world doesn't have to depend on the United States anymore. That shift in perception could carry consequences far beyond agriculture, affecting trade negotiations, energy deals, and even geopolitical alliances. This is why the final question is so critical. If America chooses to fight back, it could mean bold new policies, aggressive trade strategies, and massive investment in agriculture to remind the world of its strength. But if it hesitates, if it allows others to continue filling the gaps, the balance of power could tip permanently. Once buyers establish new partnerships, trust is not easily rebuilt. And the fear among many experts is that by the time the U.S. decides to act, it may already be too late. The stakes are high and the world is watching closely. America has been here before, faced with challenges to its dominance, but this time the battlefield is different. It's not about military might or high-tech industries, but about a humble crop that touches nearly every aspect of daily life. Corn has become the symbol of this struggle, the test of whether the United States can still command global influence or whether it has underestimated its competition. So tonight we leave you with this. The final question remains unanswered. Will America fight back and reclaim its place, or will history record this moment as the turning point when a giant was quietly outplayed? For now, the fields stand ready, the farmers wait, and the world holds its breath